This unit is focused on life on Earth and the vast amount of different living things that exist on the planet. One of the things that scientists over the years have had to deal with is the vast range of living things, from plants to animals, bacteria to fungi. To help sort out the range of life, scientists organise living things at different levels. The largest group contains lots of organisms that have a small number of characteristics in common, and these are called kingdoms. There are many levels below this, going down to the smaller groups that contain much lower numbers of organisms but who have a lot more characteristics in common, and we call these species. Scientists put the living things into these boxes using their similarities and differences in their characteristics. This will include their DNA and their physical features, such as the flowers in flowering plants and the skeletons in vertebrates. So what makes something a different species from something else? The scientific definition is that a species is a group of organisms that can breed together to produce fertile offspring. So for example, this horse could breed with another horse to make a foal, and that could go on to make more horses. And a donkey could breed with other donkeys to make a foal that could go on to make more donkeys. However, if a horse and a donkey breed together, even though they can successfully produce a young mule, this mule will not be able to produce offspring as it's not fertile, and so a horse and a donkey are separate species. All living things have adaptations. These are characteristics that increase the species' chances of survival in the environment. An obvious example is the giraffe, with its long neck, long legs and long tongue, among many others. All of these adaptations make it more likely they will survive and therefore be able to reproduce. It's important that living things have these adaptations, as they're all dependent on the environment and other species for their survival, and they're all competing with other species in the same habitat for resources. And there will always be winners and losers. If we look at the situation in a bit more detail, here you can see their food web, and it's easy from this to see how each species is dependent on each other, and this is known as interdependence. If, for example, the number of eagles decreased, then there would be less predation on the mice and robins, so their numbers would increase. This might mean that the numbers of berries would reduce, as there would be more herbivores feeding upon them. Also, the number of foxes might increase due to the increased number of prey. However, this could go on then to reduce the number of mice. You can see how complicated these interdependent relationships can be. All of these organisms are connected though, in that they ultimately rely on the energy produced by the sun. Plants absorb only a small percentage of the sun's energy for the process of photosynthesis, and they store this absorbed energy in chemicals which make up the plant's cells. This energy is then passed on up a food chain by other animals coming along and feeding upon these plants, and it's ultimately recycled by decomposers and detritivores which feed upon the dead organisms and waste material. A food chain is limited in length, as at each stage of energy transfer there's energy loss. This could be due to loss of heat, waste products and uneaten parts. This means at some stage the energy transfer will be too small to be sustainable. You can work out the efficiency of an energy transfer. If you look at this example, you can see that 1,200 joules of energy is absorbed by the plant. Of this, 200 joules is transferred to the grasshopper. The efficiency is therefore the energy transferred out, 200 joules, divided by the energy transferred in, 1,200 joules, multiplied by 100. This shows the energy efficiency at this stage to be 16.7%. If part of the food chain falls apart, then this will affect other species and can ultimately lead to their extinction. There are numerous causes for extinction, which include the environmental conditions change beyond the species' abilities to adapt, a new species that is a competitor, predator, or a disease organism of a new species is introduced, or another species, an animal, a plant, or a microorganism in its food web becomes extinct. To ensure that ecosystems keep working, nutrients such as nitrogen and carbon need to be recycled through the environment. Carbon is found in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, and this is taken into plants by photosynthesis. This process is extremely important, as it's the only process which removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. This fixed carbon is then passed on through food chains and returned to the atmosphere via the process of respiration. Remember, plants are living things and also respire. Decomposers and detritivores are extremely important in breaking down the carbon in waste materials and returning it to the atmosphere. In more recent times, humans have burnt a lot of fossil fuels, which are made from the remains of living organisms, and they release a lot of this carbon dioxide into the atmosphere via combustion. It's possible to measure the change in an environment using two main methods, non-living and living indicators. Non-living indicators include nitrate levels, temperature and carbon dioxide levels. Living indicators include the presence or absence of species such as phytoplankton, lichen, and in aquatic environments, mayfly nymphs. Life on Earth began approximately 3,500 million years ago, and it's thought that all life, including species that are now extinct, evolved from very simple living things. Charles Darwin put forward the idea of evolution by natural selection. Let's have a look at an example. Amongst the same species of giraffe, there's variation between the individuals, due in part to mutation in the genes. Therefore, some are taller than others. This means that some will be more likely to survive than others, and as some of this variation is genetic, it will get passed on to their offspring when they reproduce. Mutation may also occur in the sex cells and be passed on to their offspring. The giraffe that survives and reproduces will pass their genes on to the next generation, which will mean that more of them will have these genes. And over time, this process will lead to a change in the population. Humans have also used this principle to change species over a shorter period of time in the process called selective breeding. For example, all domestic dogs have been selectively bred from the wolf, leading to the range of dogs we know today. There are some similarities between natural selection and selective breeding, the similarities being both processes require there to be genetic variation within a species. There is a difference in the reproductive chances of individuals, whether it be due to better adaptations to the environment or having a more desirable characteristic, and also changes occur to a species over time. However, there are also differences. Selective breeding is controlled by humans and has a desired goal, and selective breeding occurs over a much shorter period of time than natural selection. There is evidence to support Darwin, which can be found in the fossil record and from analysis of the similarities and differences of the DNA of different organisms. Darwin's theory is widely accepted now, as it was the result of many observations, and it fits in with an advanced understanding of genetics, unlike Lamarck's, which had no evidence or mechanism to show how acquired characteristics could be inherited. If we come back to what we started with, when we were looking at the classification of the vast diversity of life on Earth, it's important to do this, not only because it allows us to make sense of the enormous diversity of organisms, but it also allows us to look at the evolutionary relationships between organisms. We refer to the variety of life on Earth as the biodiversity, bio meaning life and diversity meaning the differences. Biodiversity can refer to the number of different species, the range of different types of organisms such as whether you've got plants, animals and microorganisms, but also the genetic variation within the species. It's important to maintain biodiversity as we're currently finding new opportunities for medicines in a wide range of plants that we didn't know existed. And we also rely on a wide range of living things as food crops, and these need to be maintained going into a changing global future. Extinction rates are currently rapidly increasing, and this is widely believed to be driven by humans, and it's therefore important to maintain biodiversity to ensure the conservation of different species, to ensure a sustainable future. Large-scale monoculture crop production, where you only grow one type of plant, isn't sustainable, as it does not maintain biodiversity. In the future, we need to improve the sustainability of our packaging materials. We can do this by cutting down on excess packaging, by considering the use of our packaging and the type of the packaging that we're going to use, the energy we need to use to create and transport it, and the pollution produced in manufacturing it. Even if the packaging is biodegradable, it's still a good idea to reduce the amount of packaging used. This is because the amount of energy needed to produce and transport it, and also the fact that in oxygen deficient landfill sites it will decompose slowly.